Hi, my name is Vanessa. I am 27 years old, and although sometimes it seems like just yesterday I was sitting at a student desk and taking notes during lectures, in fact, I have been working as a teacher in a private school for 5 years now, and honestly, it is the best job I have ever had. Because even though children can be restless, stubborn, and sometimes too loud, each new school day brings me a special feeling of importance, fills me with warmth and joy, because I see how they grow, how they gradually gain self-confidence, and how they are drawn to the knowledge that I try to impart to them. 5 years ago, right after graduating from college, my mother made me an offer that I honestly could not refuse, and it has in some ways defined my life. I remember that evening well. We were sitting at the kitchen table opposite each other, and my mother suddenly said, "Vanessa, dear, do you remember Aunt Clara's old apartment? The one she left me in her will?" I remembered it very well, of course, because as a child I had spent countless evenings there, listening to Aunt Clara's leisurely, wise, and humorous stories, interspersed with recollections of her youth, of trips, of chance encounters, and at the same time treating me to her signature homemade cookies, smelling of vanilla and cinnamon. The apartment was in a very good neighborhood, just 2 blocks from the school where I had just been hired, and when my mother asked cautiously, "What do you think about this?" I did not immediately understand what she was getting at, but soon it became clear. "Well, instead of renting the apartment to strangers, why don't you live there yourself? I will charge you 20% below market rate. It is better to keep it in the family." I didn't have to think long because it was the perfect option. A spacious apartment with 2 bedrooms, a decent kitchen, and, importantly, close to my new job, so that I could walk to school every morning, enjoying a stroll through the green neighborhoods. I agreed and soon moved in, starting to pay my mother $800 a month, which was a real gift compared to the $1,000 that similar apartments in the area were asking at the time. Over the years, I put all my energy and savings into this place. Gradually, step by step, I saved up money and did a complete renovation. I laid new wooden floors, updated the plumbing, painted the walls in warm, cozy colors, and then gradually began to buy furniture, choosing not the cheapest, but high quality. First, I brought in a beautiful sectional sofa, then a dining set, later a king-size bed with a memory foam mattress, and even indulged in the luxury of a huge 65-inch smart TV, which is now such a joy to spend winter evenings in front of. Mom came by every few months to look at the apartment, and each time she marveled at the changes. "You've done such a wonderful job with this place," she would say, running her hand over the smooth granite countertops that I had installed after much thought and agonizing over various options. "Aunt Clara would be so proud of you," Mom would add. And in those moments I felt a special warmth, as if the connection between generations was preserved not only in our words, but also in the walls of this apartment. The only thing that marred my peace was my younger sister Laura. She is 23 and she still lives at home with Mom and Dad. According to her mom, Laura is currently finding herself, which translated into everyday language meant endless morning naps until noon, hanging out with friends, and no work at all. Don't get me wrong, I love Laura, she's my sister, and for as long as I can remember, I've helped her when she was in trouble. When she mindlessly spent her entire credit card on clothes, I paid off the debt. When she suddenly needed money for a girls' trip to Miami, I gave her the amount she needed, and last year, she practically begged me, tearfully, for the latest iPhone. "Vanessa, please, all my friends have iPhone 14 Pros, and I'm still stuck with this ancient iPhone 11. I look like a loser," she whined. I bought her the phone, spending $1,200, and while it was a big chunk of change for my budget, seeing her happy face beaming with joy was worth it. Lately, however, our monthly family dinners had taken on a strange tone. Laura had been complaining more and more about life at home. "I'm so tired of Mom and Dad treating me like a child," she said one day, absent-mindedly stabbing her mashed potatoes with her fork. "I'm 23, I want my independence." I tried to sound calm and said, "Well, get a job and move out." I wasn't trying to be mean or harsh, just stating the obvious. But Laura pursed her lips. "It's not that simple, Vanessa. You don't understand." Dad looked confused. Mom quickly steered the conversation toward my job, and an awkward silence fell over the table. The conversation that really stuck with me happened 2 months ago. Laura kept going on and on about privacy, about how she couldn't live with her parents forever. "I'm an adult," she said confidently. I asked, "Okay, so what's your plan? How are you going to pay the rent if you don't have a job?" She just shrugged. "I'm thinking about my options." "What options?" I asked. "I don't know yet, but I'll think of something," she replied with the same ease with which she always treated serious questions. I decided not to insist. Laura was used to deciding everything at the last minute, and frankly, it wasn't my problem. I had enough of my own things to do: lessons, notebooks, bills to pay, and worries that could not be postponed. After that dinner, I somehow forgot about the whole conversation, because Laura's complaints about life at home were not entirely new. On the contrary, for the past year she had been repeating the same thing over and over again, like a broken record, and I had long since stopped taking her words seriously, thinking that either one day she would really find the motivation to get a job and start providing for herself, or she would continue to live in the comfortable world that her mom and dad created for her, without requiring any effort from her. It seemed to me then that my life had developed quite harmoniously. Getting up at 6:30 in the morning, a cup of strong coffee with toast, going to school at 7:45, lessons, notebooks, tests, returning home to my renovated and cozy apartment, where I could finally breathe easy. I dedicated my weekends to myself, cooking, watching Netflix on a huge TV, or meeting with friends, and all this together seemed to me a correct and measured existence in which there is order and joy. The apartment now truly felt like my home. Every piece of furniture had a story and reminded me of my efforts. The coffee table I'd once found at an estate sale and restored myself was a reminder of my perseverance. The bookshelf where my college textbooks stood next to my favorite novels filled the room with my past and my dreams. And the dining room table, where I'd hosted boisterous, fun evenings with colleagues, seemed to be imbued with memories of laughter, conversation, and shared closeness. My mother was proud of what I'd done with the apartment. Every time she visited, she'd end up taking photos of the rooms, and then, I learned, showing them to her friends, saying, "Look what Vanessa did with Aunt Clara's house. Isn't it wonderful?" And it felt good to know that she truly appreciated my efforts and investments, because over the years I had spent about $15,000 on renovations and furniture. But it was worth it because this apartment had become my true sanctuary, the place I came back to after difficult days filled with 7th grade drama. It was a Saturday morning, and I was sleeping especially soundly because on Saturdays I always allowed myself the luxury of staying in bed until at least 9, and then had a leisurely breakfast and a lazy day. But this time, everything went wrong. At exactly 6 in the morning, I heard a sound that instantly woke me up and made my heart pound in my chest because the front door of my apartment opened. My eyes snapped open, grabbing the phone from the nightstand, my hands shaking as I frantically considered whether I should call the police, because the only explanation that came to mind was that someone had broken into my home. I forced myself to get up and crept quietly to the bedroom door, trying to breathe quietly, and at that very moment I heard distinct footsteps in the hallway and the sound of something heavy dragging along the floor. A frightening thought immediately popped into my head. What if this was a robber, and what if he had a gun? I slowly opened the door, looked out into the hallway, and froze, because there was Laura standing in the hallway with 2 huge suitcases. All the tension, all the animal fear suddenly turned to anger, and I, still in my pajamas, screamed, "Laura, what are you doing? You scared the living daylights out of me." But she just looked at me with that casual smile that always irritated me and calmly replied, "Oh, hi, Vanessa." "Sorry. Did I wake you up?" I was stunned. "You woke me up? It's 6 in the morning on Saturday. Why didn't you knock? Why didn't you call earlier? And what kind of suitcases are these?" She just shrugged and casually dragged them further into the apartment. I just decided to stop by. It's okay. It's okay? I couldn't believe my ears. How did you even get in here? Mom gave me the key, she answered casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I froze. Mom gave you the key? To my apartment? Well, it's not really your apartment, is it? It's Mom's apartment. It belongs to her, Laura said, and at that moment I felt a cold wave roll over my chest. She dropped her suitcases in the living room and, as if she were at home, headed for my bedroom. This is the main one, right? It has a bigger closet and a better view. I'm taking this room, she said, opening my closet door and unceremoniously rummaging through my clothes. Are you crazy? I tried desperately to stop her. Laura, stop touching my things and explain to me what's going on. But without even slowing down, she turned around and answered with a smile. Mom said I could move in with you. She thinks it's time for me to have some independence, but not be too far away from my family. So now we're roommates. Won't that be fun? My head was spinning because this seemed like a ridiculous joke, or at worst, some kind of monstrous misunderstanding, because I couldn't believe that my mother had actually decided to let Laura move in with me without even asking my permission, as if I were a stranger in my own home. With trembling fingers, I fumbled for the phone and dialed my mother's number, and only after 4 long rings did she finally answer in a sleepy voice. Vanessa, why are you calling so early? It's 6 in the morning. I barely kept my voice from shaking. Mom, Laura came with her suitcases and said that you allowed her to move in with me. Explain what this means? There was a pause on the line, and then came her calm, even a little tired answer. Oh, this Laura is long overdue for a place of her own, but she can't afford to pay for her own place yet, so this is the perfect solution. The perfect solution? For whom? I exclaimed. Mom, this is my home. You can't just decide who will live here without talking to me. On the other end of the line, Mom's voice changed, became hard and cold. This is not your home, Vanessa. This is my apartment. I own it. These words hit me like a slap in the face, because for 5 years I considered this place my own. I put all my effort and money into it. I took care of it as if it were my own home. And now to hear that all my efforts mean nothing was almost unbearable. I've lived here for 5 years. I've invested thousands of dollars in repairs and furnishings. I desperately objected, but Mom just added calmly, I appreciate it, but it's still my property. I took a deep breath, trying not to snap. Okay, so how much is Laura paying for rent? And how are we going to split the utilities? I heard a laugh, quiet, dry, but full of determination. Laura's not going to pay rent, Vanessa. You're going to? I felt my insides drop. This is crazy. Mom, why should I pay for her to live here when I never even agreed to it? But she didn't flinch. Because you have a job and a steady income, and Laura is still figuring things out. I couldn't believe my ears. Every answer she gave me was like a knife, and when I told her it wasn't fair, Mom just snapped. Life isn't fair, Vanessa. Besides, I'm thinking about raising the rent. Starting next month, you'll be paying $1,600. $1,600? I gasped. Mom, that's twice what I'm paying now. The market rate has gone up. I have to adjust, she explained calmly. It's even more than the market price. I couldn't take it anymore. I can find a better apartment for less? Is that a threat? Are you saying you'll move out? There was steel in my mom's voice. I'm saying it's unfair and you know it, I whispered. Well, Vanessa, if you want to move out, that's your right. Laura has friends who are looking for a place to live and will pay the full amount without any problem, so the choice is yours. I could barely hold the phone in my hands, which were shaking so badly I thought I was going to drop it. 5 years of my life, 5 years of work and care, 5 years of memories, and now my mother was ready to erase it all by kicking me out for Laura and her friends. I hung up, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. At that moment, Laura stuck her head out of my bedroom and asked carelessly, So, when are you moving your things into the guest room? "I want to get settled in today," I forced myself to say, "soon," and my voice was barely louder than a whisper. I spent the rest of Saturday on my laptop, browsing rental websites. My heart was pounding with anger and hurt, but I knew I had to focus on finding a new place to live, because I couldn't stay here, where I'd been betrayed. Meanwhile, Laura was acting as if she owned the place. She was blasting music loudly in my former bedroom, chatting on the phone with her friends, laughing, making plans for the parties she was going to throw here, and every word she said was like a slap in the face, because this was my apartment, my home, that was being taken away from me. By the evening, I had found 3 options that looked more or less suitable. All of them were smaller and more expensive than I had paid until recently, but each of them had something that was no longer here: my dignity and peace. I scheduled viewings for Sunday and went to bed with a heavy heart, although in fact I barely slept a wink. In the morning, waking up earlier than usual, I quietly made coffee, trying not to wake Laura, who was snoring in my former bedroom, and checked the addresses of the apartments I was going to see. The first one turned out to be a complete disaster. The photos on the internet were deceptive, and in reality, the apartment greeted me with a persistent smell of cigarettes and stains on the ceiling. The second option looked better, but the price was clearly too high for what was offered. And only the third apartment turned out to be different. It was in a quiet area, 15 minutes away from the school. The building was old but well preserved, and its owner was a nice elderly woman named Mrs. Gotti, who personally gave me a tour. The apartment was smaller than the one I was used to, only 1 bedroom instead of 2, but it had its own special character, some kind of coziness and warmth, as if the walls breathed the memories of previous residents and wanted to give me the opportunity to start life anew, without constant pressure from the family, without endless reproaches and omissions. The hardwood floors gleamed pleasantly in the light from the large windows, through which soft morning light streamed in, filling the kitchen with a golden glow. And this kitchen, despite its modest size, seemed ideal to me, because there was no stranger's laughter, no loud music, no feeling that at any moment someone would burst in and declare their right to dispose of my space. According to Mrs. Gaddy, the rent was $950 a month, which required me to pay the first month, the last month, and a deposit at once. And although this was a little more than I had once paid my mother, it was still much less than the insane amount she was now demanding, taking advantage of her position and my vulnerable position. And the most important thing was not even the price, but the fact that this apartment would be mine, only mine, without imposed roommates, without family drama and humiliating conversations where my words meant nothing. "I'll take it," I said without hesitation, my heart racing at the thought of my new freedom. "When can I move in?" I asked, trying to hide my excitement. "Next week, if you can get the deposit by Wednesday," Mrs. Gaddy replied with a soft smile, and we shook hands immediately, sealing our agreement. I wrote out the check and instantly felt like a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders, as if I had finally taken a step in the right direction, freed myself from the trap my own mother had set for me. But as soon as I got into the car and drove home, reality came crashing back in all its weight, and I suddenly realized that I had invested way too much in my mother's apartment over the years. The renovations, the furniture, the details that I had chosen with love and care. Was I really going to leave all that to Laura and her noisy friends? No, damn it. I bought that sectional myself, saved for months, tutored in the evenings to pay for the dining room set, and every single piece in there was a part of my life, a part of my effort, a part of my labor. Laura, who always got everything for nothing, didn't deserve to inherit the fruits of my labor just because my mother decided to throw me out for her favorite. That night, I sat in the dimly lit living room and plotted my escape. I called my friend Jake, who worked for a moving company, and trying to sound as calm as possible, I asked, "Hey, are you working this Wednesday? I need to move out of my apartment, but I need to do it while my roommate is out." Jake chuckled. "That sounds like drama." "You have no idea," I replied, my voice bitter. Then I called Lisa and Mark, my two most trusted friends, and they barely heard my story before agreeing to help on Wednesday morning. The plan was simple and almost flawless. Laura usually left around 10 in the morning to meet friends at the mall or somewhere and returned late at night, so we had a few hours to collect everything that was rightfully mine. Wednesday came, and I took the day off work by lying about being sick, and while I felt a little guilty about lying, I knew this was a life-or-death emergency. I watched from the window until I saw Laura walking out of the apartment wearing her ridiculously expensive sunglasses and carrying the giant bag I'd gotten her for her birthday a year ago, and the sight filled me with a mixture of anger and relief. As soon as the door slammed behind her, I grabbed the phone and called Jake. She's gone. Come Over Lisa and Mark showed up first with boxes and packing tape, and we worked like a team, packing my things, carefully labeling each box. The sectional couch, the dining table and chairs, the bedroom set, the coffee table, the TV, even the kitchen appliances I'd bought to replace the old, rusty ones I'd gotten with the apartment. "Are you sure you want to take the microwave?" Lisa asked, picking up the box. "It seems like a small thing." "I bought it," I said firmly. "Laura can sort out her own kitchen." I kept only some old furniture that had once belonged to Aunt Clara, the kitchen table and a couple of chairs, and an old dresser in the guest room. But everything else went with me because I wasn't about to leave anything valuable in the hands of strangers. Jake and his crew were amazing. They loaded everything onto the truck in less than 3 hours, and when the job was done, I walked around the apartment one last time, carefully examining each room to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. The apartment felt empty and foreign without my things, and although part of me felt a little sad that 5 years of my life had been erased so quickly, the main feeling was one of liberation, of finally throwing off heavy shackles. I followed the truck to my new apartment where Mrs. Gaddy was waiting with the keys. "Welcome to your new home," she said warmly, and her smile reminded me that something new was really beginning. Lisa, Mark, and I spent the rest of the day unpacking boxes and arranging furniture, and although I was exhausted, I felt incredibly relieved and happy. We ordered pizza, laughed at the difficulty of fitting a couch into a small space, and by evening, my new apartment was starting to feel like a real home. The couch looked perfect in the living room, the bedroom was cozy, and the sunlight streaming through the windows created an atmosphere of warmth and calm. "This place has great energy," Mark said, lounging on the couch with a bottle of beer. "So much better than where there's constant family drama." I smiled tiredly, knowing he was right. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang, and Laura's name appeared on the screen. I couldn't help but smile as I imagined her entering an empty apartment where there was no trace of its former coziness. I didn't answer and calmly let the call go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, she called again, and although in another situation the constant calls might have been annoying, at that moment I felt a strange satisfaction, because in my imagination the scene was clearly drawn. Laura standing in the center of the empty apartment, looking around in confusion, not believing her eyes, and realizing that all the expensive furniture that she had probably already managed to show off to her friends, and which she was going to use for spectacular Instagram photos, had disappeared without a trace. It was as if I saw her expression change from smug to almost comical horror, and this image gave me strength. Finally, at 9:30, my mother's name appeared on the screen of my phone, and although I was expecting this call, something inside me painfully trembled. I decided to answer. "Vanessa, what the hell did you do?" Mom's voice was sharp, cold, and full of condemnation. "I moved the furniture to the new apartment," I said calmly, trying to keep the regret out of my voice. "You can't just take everything away," she almost shouted. "Why not?" I allowed myself a grin. "I bought all this with my own money." "But Laura has nowhere to sleep," Mom's voice broke, a note of pity entering it. Not for me, but for her. "There's not even a couch. It sounds like Laura's problem." "Or maybe it's your problem, since you were the one who decided that she should live there," I countered, feeling the fire of years of pent-up resentment ignite inside me. "You're vindictive and selfish," Mom concluded coldly. "I'm practical," I snapped. I found an apartment and I'm moving out, just like you suggested." There was a moment of silence, so thick that I could hear my own breathing, and then Mom's voice became even harsher than before. "Great. You know what, Vanessa? I'm glad you're gone. Laura's friends are moving in next week and they'll be paying full rent without all the drama. You've shown your true colors." "My true colors?" I asked, feeling my blood boil. "Mom, are you serious? You chose Laura over me? You took away 5 years of being a good tenant and a good daughter who paid her bills, respected the rules, helped around the house, all to indulge Laura's lazy lifestyle." "Laura is trying to find herself," Mom interrupted me sharply. "Laura is 23. I couldn't help myself and raised my voice. "When I was 23, I worked and paid my own bills. You won't help her if you let her live for free. Don't lecture me on raising children." I heard a metallic note in her voice. "And I'm not going to," I answered coldly. "I'm done with all this. Have a nice time with Laura and her friends." I didn't give her time to answer. I just hung up, and a moment later, I blocked her number, then Laura and even my dad, just in case, so that not a single word from them would penetrate my life. I didn't want to hear anything from them, and for the first time in many months, I felt a long-awaited peace. That night, I slept better than in weeks, in my own bed, in my own apartment, without other people's dramas and unwanted neighbors. And it was an amazing feeling, as if I was surrounded not only by comfort, but also by an invisible protective cocoon. 8 months passed, and I almost forgot how peaceful life can be when it is not overshadowed by constant family conflicts. My new apartment became a refuge for me, a place where I felt safe and could finally breathe deeply. I liked my morning routine: freshly brewed coffee in the sunny kitchen, quiet getting ready for work, no eternal queue for the bathroom and intrusive noise. The commute took a little longer, but I accepted it as a small price to pay for the peace and quiet. I didn't miss family dinners that usually turned into nothing but criticism and comparison. I didn't miss Laura's endless requests for loans. I didn't miss my mother's passive-aggressive comments about my life choices. For the first time in a long time, I was living the life I wanted. One day, on my way home from work and stopping at the grocery store for bread and fruit, I ran into Aunt Carol, my father's sister, completely by chance. We always got along, and she never got involved in the drama that played out around the apartment. "Vanessa, how are you, dear?" she said, and hugged me so tightly, as if she wanted to convey the warmth that I so missed from my own mother. "I'm doing great, Aunt Carol." "How are you?" I answered, trying to smile. She glanced around as if checking if anyone else could hear us, and leaned closer. "Can we talk alone for a minute?" We went into a small coffee shop, sat by the window, and I immediately noticed that she looked unusually embarrassed, as if she was considering whether I should say what was already on the tip of her tongue. "What's going on?" I asked softly. "Well, I probably shouldn't tell you," she began hesitantly, "but I thought you should know. Your mother has started having serious problems with her apartment." I tried to keep a calm expression on my face, but everything inside me was clenching. "What problems?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Those friends of Laura's who moved in," Auntie paused. "They cause all sorts of trouble. Loud parties every weekend, music until 3 in the morning, people coming and going at all hours. But that's not the worst of it." She looked around again, lowering her voice to almost a whisper. 2 weeks ago, they flooded Mrs. Rossetti's apartment downstairs. My heart sank painfully. I knew Mrs. Rossetti, a sweet old woman who had lived there for over 30 years, who carefully preserved the antique furniture and rare books that her late husband had collected. "How bad is it?" I whispered, feeling a chill run down my spine. "Bad, Vanessa." "Very bad," Auntie Carol sighed. "Water came through the ceiling and ruined thousands of dollars worth of furniture and books. Some of them were first editions, unique and irreplaceable. I felt sick just thinking about it. I saw Mrs. Rossetti serving me homemade cookies during my senior week in college. "What exactly happened?" I finally asked, my voice shaking. From what I had heard, Laura's friends were having a party, and one of them, already pretty drunk, left the water in the bathroom running, and the rest were too busy shouting and playing music and drinking to notice that the water was spilling over the edge, splashing across the floor, and gradually seeping through the ceiling to the neighbors below. My God. I closed my eyes at the image because I immediately imagined poor Mrs. Rossetti finding her living room flooded. Aunt Carol said ruefully that Mrs. Rossetti was now demanding $20,000 in damages and threatening to sue if my mother didn't pay. She has all the documents on hand confirming what exactly was destroyed and how much each loss was valued at. $20,000. I almost laughed at the irony of fate. My mother was so worried about getting more rent, raising my price, hoping to profit from someone else's obedience. And in the end, she received a bill for 25 times more than I paid her regularly and on time every month. "How do you know all this?" I asked cautiously, and a shadow of doubt flashed in my aunt's eyes. But then she explained that Mrs. Rossetti called her because she knew about our relationship and hoped to find out through her whether it was possible to somehow come to an agreement with my mother without the intervention of the court. But, as it turned out, my mother insists to everyone that she is not to blame, that the damage was caused by the tenants, and allegedly she is not held accountable. However, Mrs. Rossetti's lawyer stated bluntly, "Since my mother is the landlord, she bears full legal responsibility for the actions of those to whom she entrusted the apartment." My aunt and I talked for a while longer, but soon she had to leave on business, and her words seemed to be buzzing in my head. For several days, I could not get the incident out of my head. I was truly sorry for Mrs. Rossetti, for her loss, for her tears over the destroyed books and furniture that reminded her of her husband. But I was not at all surprised that it was Laura's friends who were capable of bringing everything to such a state of chaos. Laura herself had never been responsible in her life. Her childhood and teenage mistakes were always hushed up, and her whims were fulfilled without question. And so I saw no reason why her surroundings should be different. A couple of days later, an unfamiliar number called. At first I wanted to hang up, but some inner feeling told me to answer. "Vanessa," my mother's voice sounded, and those two syllables sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Listen, I need to talk to you." I exhaled and, trying to keep my voice from breaking, said, "We have nothing to talk about." But my mother didn't back down. "Vanessa, please. I need your help. We're having financial difficulties, and I was hoping you could lend us some money." I even closed my eyes, because I realized too clearly that she wasn't going to tell me the truth about Mrs. Rossetti, that she was hoping I didn't know and would just agree to save her. "Let me guess," I said sharply. "It has nothing to do with Laura's friends turning the first floor into a mess? The neighbor's apartment, right?" There was silence on the other end, so long I could almost hear her breathing. Finally, my mother exhaled. "How did you find out about that?" I laughed dryly, without humor. "What difference does it make? The important thing is that you created this mess by choosing Laura and her irresponsible friends over me. And now you want me to bail you out?" My mother tried to sound pitiful. "Vanessa, we don't have $20,000. But I just shook my head, although she didn't see it. "It's not my problem." "Please, honey," she begged. "I know we've made some mistakes, but we're a family." The word family sounded like a sneer coming from her. "Family?" I asked. "You kicked me out of the house for Laura. You doubled my rent and told me I could leave if I didn't like it. You chose her over me, and now you're paying the consequences," she protested. "We didn't kick you out. You chose to leave." "I chose to leave because you made my life miserable," I said harshly, "and now your favorite friends of Laura's have made your life miserable." Funny how things turn out. "You're cruel," Mom hissed. "No, I'm being honest," I said. "You've let Laura get away with anything your whole life, and now you're surprised she and her crowd are irresponsible. You made your bed, Mom. Now sleep in it." "So you're not going to help us?" she asked with a last-ditch hope. "No way. Deal with this yourself, like you always should have," I said, and before she could continue, I hung up. I immediately blocked that number too, cutting myself off from any attempts to drag me into their chaos. Months passed, and I still didn't know how exactly they resolved the situation with Mrs. Rossetti. They probably either paid compensation or lost the lawsuit, but either way, it was no longer my business. I was living my life. One day, I was in a shopping mall choosing a new dress for a teacher's conference, when my gaze accidentally fell on a familiar figure behind the counter. Laura was standing there, wearing a name tag, carefully folding sweaters, looking much more modest than in the days when she lived off someone else and considered herself the center of the world. Our eyes met briefly, and I clearly saw recognition in her eyes, but she quickly looked away and, pretending to be busy with an employee, began to hurriedly unpack her things, just to avoid conversation. I walked past without saying a word because I knew there was nothing to say. She finally had a job, which was better than the time she'd been passing the buck. Maybe it was the wake-up call that she'd gotten kicked out of the house after the flood when her friends couldn't pay the rent. Or maybe her mother, tired of litigation, had cut her off. Whatever the case, seeing Laura at work was a symbol of justice, proof that life had its own set of priorities. I'd left them all happy with their choices and built a new life for myself. A life where I was no longer exploited by my family, where I had dignity, independence, and peace of mind. Would our family relationship ever be restored? Maybe. But only if they admitted they were wrong and sincerely apologized for what they'd done to me. I wasn't going to pretend everything was okay just to keep the peace.